Welcome to the Mick Dark Horror Series. Lights out. Good. Here we go.
The tide was low, and a thick white fog blanketed the bay. From my study window, I gazed out over the white canopy, searching the cloud for what I knew would be there. The only sound was that of the rolling waves and the soft beating of my heart. On land, I was safe, but I feared for any sailor who found themselves trapped in that white mist, trapped along with the Santa Clarita. I sat forward in my desk chair as I caught a glimpse of the tattered yellow sails and the center mass peeking from the fog. Then it was gone again, but I knew it was still there, still circling those icy waters, preying on any living ship it came across. The Santa Clarita had sailed the sea in 1594, found its end upon our shores, and now haunts the bay outside my window. And every low tide the fog comes in, carrying the ghost ship with it. The ship was a mighty merchant vessel for the Spaniards. It had been known to withstand any pirate attack and weather any storm. It was manned by 30 men, who all followed blindly the ship's captain, Eduardo Ruiz. Eduardo was a beast of a man, legends stating that he towered at 7 feet tall. He was muscular, handsome, and intense. His face was rugged, and he was blind in his left eye. He had long black hair and a matching beard that reached down to the center of his chest. Every man on his ship had a role, and they made sure to do it. By his guidance, the Santa Clarita became a proud ship in the Spanish Empire. But of course, she was eventually lost to history. At her prime, the Santa Clarita was the chosen vessel to carry a sacred treasure that had been discovered in the New World. The mission was hushed, and little documentation exists to back up this fact. No one is sure what exactly the ship was carrying, but some say it was the well-sought-after fountain of youth. Those who knew of the mission were the crew of the ship, and those who discovered the treasure. The prime goal of the ship was to escort this treasure back to Spain and avoid conflict in any other vessels upon the sea. Because of this, Eduardo chose a longer but less traveled path back to Spain. The path led the ship right along the bay that I currently reside in. This path led the ship to its grave. It was in the dark of night when the Santa Clarita appeared on the horizon. The town then wasn't nearly as big as it is now, and had only a few farms and the lighthouse. Said lighthouse was perched on a peninsula of rocks that jutted out into the bay. It was manned by only one soul, and that night the light was out. Many reasons as to why the light was out had circled the town for generations, but no one is sure exactly what happened. The man who lived in the lighthouse and his descendants all claim that the light was aflame the whole night. It should have been enough of a warning to the Santa Clarita. Another factor leading to the demise of the Santa Clarita and its crew is the dense fog that blanketed the island that night. It was thick, cold, and impenetrable. This combination of weather, low tide, and the unlit lighthouse is what led to the horrific tragedy that took place. It is said that the town awoke to the screaming of men and the crunching of splitting wood. In the thick fog, no one on land could pinpoint where the wreck was happening, and the villagers all stood on the shore, lanterns held high as they squinted into the dark fog. The voices of the sailors swirled in the air, and the horror in their screams stilled the hearts of any who heard. One by one, splinters of wood, crates of supplies, and bodies of the dead washed ashore. From a distance, one could not tell one from the other. The icy blue hands of the men grasped at the sand on the beach, and the villagers watched in stunned horror. The villagers carried the dead sailors inland and buried them the best they could in the frozen earth. The corpses laid in shallow unmarked graves, side by side. 29 men were found, buried, and pitied. There was no clue where they came from, where they were going, and why they traveled so close to the shore. Decades passed, and the town grew into a slightly larger village. Still, as time changed, the stories did not. From father to son, mother to daughter, the story of the Santa Clarita was passed down. It would have been just a legend, a story of an awful event with no truth behind it, if it wasn't for the appearance of the ghostly ship at low tide. Fishermen have gone missing, their boats washing up a destroyed mess within the hour. The lighthouse is still manned, and its light still shines, now powered by a bulb instead of a burning flame. The man who was the keeper during the wreckage is a distant relative to me. Unbeknownst to the townspeople at that time, the keeper witnessed and partaked in another event that happened that same night. What he said was true. The light burned the entire night, and even he shouted at the ship as it approached the shore. From the top of the lighthouse, you could see the masts of the ship inching forward, cutting through the thick fog. He waved his arms, trying to shout above the crashing waves. He held a lantern in one hand, hoping that if they couldn't see the light from the lighthouse, maybe they would see the lantern. He gripped the railing as the ship made contact with the rocks below. Squeezing his eyes shut, he held tightly as the structure shook violently. The screams of the sailors drifted up from below, and the keeper started to cry. Their voices full of panic and fear, and were somehow louder than the crunching and snapping wood of the ship. For what felt like hours, the men below screamed, and the keeper refused to open his eyes and looked down at the dying men below. The stillness that settled in the air was sudden and unnerving. Slowly, the keeper released his iron grip from the railing and opened his eyes. All that could be heard was the crashing of the waves and the rapid beating of his heart. Gathering his will, he peered over the edge and gazed into the dense fog below. Through the haze, he could catch glimpses of shattered wood that was once a proud vessel. Amongst the broken debris, he could see a glimpse of scarlet red. Taking his lantern in a shaking hand, the keeper descended the inner staircase of the lighthouse, dreading what he would see when he stepped out onto the shore. They were dead. All of them had to be. But he wouldn't be able to forgive himself if he didn't check and make sure. Exiting the lighthouse, he went around the side into the site of the wreckage. Some of the destroyed ship had been sucked back into the sea, but the keeper could still see that patch of red he had seen from above. Now closer, and with less fog to cloud his view, the keeper could make out the silhouette of a man thrown against the rocks. The body was coated in a long red coat that had been stained that color from all the blood. Now it was impossible to tell what color it had been originally. In the man's arms was a small wooden chest that was clenched tightly between two corpse-like hands. The man's face was buried in the rocks, and the keeper didn't want to see the tattered bloody mess he was sure it was. Approaching slowly, The keeper held his light aloft and knelt down beside the dead man. The bones were broken in all of its limbs, and bits of barnacles clung to its matted long black hair. The waves lapped at the dead man's feet, threatening to pull it back into the ocean, where it rightly belonged. Quickly, for fear of the dead man suddenly waking and showing its horrid face, the keeper pried the wooden chest from the stiff blue fingers and stepped back. He pressed his back against the lighthouse walls and looked down at the box now in his hands. It was ornate, with coloured golden etchings carved on its dark wood. Enchanted, the keeper set his lantern at his feet, then slowly lifted the lid of the box. An icy firm hand wrapped around the keeper's left ankle, and a scream escaped the keeper's lips. Almost dropping the box, the keeper looked down and viewed a most unholy sight. The dead man had crawled his way up the rocks and to the feet of the keeper. Its right arm was dangling limply from its socket, and both legs were twisted in unnatural positions. The face that peered up at him was ghastly and full of unbridled hate. The once dead eye of Captain Eduardo Ruiz hung loosely from its socket, but still twitched and spun on the tendon. The other was sliced in half, and viscous black blood seeped from the wound. Barnacles covered the grey skin, and a large, ugly gash ripped across the thing's forehead. Its teeth were splintered and gnashing behind swollen black lips. Letting out another terrified scream, the keeper attempted to shake loose the grasp of the dead captain while trying to back away from it. The corpse clung on. Seawater gargled in the thing's dead throat as it tried to speak. It sunk its black nails into the flesh of the keeper's ankle, causing another scream. His flight instincts were not working, so fight took over. Holding the wooden box tightly in both hands, the keeper let out an animalistic scream and brought the heavy object onto the rotted face. The lad's squelch could be heard as the man's hands and the box sunk into the rotten flesh. Completely caving in the face of the once proud captain, the thing slumped over, but its grip still remained tight on the keeper's ankles. Panting heavily, the keeper stood for a moment, looking down at his attacker, waiting for any more movement. After a silent second, the keeper shook loose the dead hand, then kicked the rotten body into the sea. The black icy waters greedily swallowed its meal, and that was the last anyone had seen of Captain Eduardo Ruiz. Limping back into the lighthouse, the keeper sat at his desk, placed the now bloodied box before him. Even though it was now soaked in dark crimson, the gold carving still glimmered in the candlelight. Delicately, the keeper lifted the lid of the box and peered inside. It's now 2021, and I am the keeper of the lighthouse. I watch from my viewpoint atop the lighthouse as the dead ship circles the bay. It has come every low tide since, and it won't leave until it gets what is rightfully theirs. I gaze down at the box in my hands, the blood long since dried and stained. I run a thumb softly over the golden images and smile. This box and its contents are a thing that no man should control. The gift of everlasting life is one that shouldn't exist. Yet here I am, decades and decades later, still here, still running my lighthouse. Captain Ruiz is on that ship. I can catch glimpses of his deep red coat when the fog lifts. I know he waits for me, and that I can never leave this island without him pursuing me. That is all right with me, though. I am alive, and he is dead, so he can sail his ghostly ship and I'll light my beautiful lighthouse. I shall stay this way forever.